Commission to order. We have enough members for a quorum tonight. Do we have any remarks from any of the members or chair? Any remarks? All right. Moving forward, do we have a motion? Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes from last meeting? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Staff committee reports?
None at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, moving forward, we'll start with our public hearing. The first person up will be Todd, who has been helping us with drafting this and putting it all together. So he'll start with a presentation, and then once we get done with that, we'll move forward into the public hearing part, and we will limit each speaker to about 4 minutes. So go ahead, Todd. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. You all have seen a lot of me, but for the benefit of those in the audience, I'm Todd Gordon. I'm senior planner at EPR. We're a planning and engineering firm. We're located in Charlottesville. But we've been working with the town on a couple of items since 2020. With respect to the zoning ordinance. So what I'll do now is give kind of the outline presentation of the proposed changes to the ordinance. If you attended a previous Planning Commission meeting in October, or the public meeting last week, or have seen the presentation on the website, this is going to be the same presentation, essentially. But just to give us a foundation and cover what we want to discuss this evening. All right. So the process of updating the zoning ordinance started in 2020 when we completed the zoning ordinance review process and report. So that was kind of a 90-day look at the ordinance and the ordinance's compliance with state law, with compliance with the town's comprehensive plan, and a general look at how the ordinance might be organized better and become more usable. So that report identified some issues and made some recommendations. Phase 2 of that work has taken place over the last 18 months, has been to draft the specific text that implements those recommendations. So throughout this process, we've worked with staff, we've worked with you all on the individual recommendations. At no point in this process was the idea to reinvent Bedford. You all are a fantastic town that everyone loves very much. But the idea was to make small changes to this zoning ordinance that help the ordinance to function better, to be more understandable, and more usable for property owners and for the town government. So if you review that Phase 1 document from 2020, you see that it's organized around 6 themes. Those are the goals. They're based on the comprehensive plan, and they kind of express the town's long-range vision and strategies. So this presentation is organized along those same 6 revision themes. So I'll talk about the individual revisions that fit under these 6 topics. But the 6 topics, first, streamlining the ordinance so it's for clarity and usability. Second, protecting single-family neighborhoods. Third, activating Centertown. Fourth, stimulating residential and employment growth. 5, increasing development flexibility. And 6, putting less focus on individual use and more focus on scale and character. So those are our 6 big topics. So first, let's talk about the specific recommendations under the streamlining tab. So the first thing we can do to streamline the ordinance is list all the district information in one place. So previously, or in the existing ordinance as it still exists, Article 6 and Article 8 both have some of the ingredients of districts. The intent, the permitted uses are in one article. Setbacks and building heights and lot sizes are in a different article. So ideally, we'd have all that stuff in one article where it's easiest to find to keep people from having to flip back and forth between pages to understand what they're trying to understand. Next, listing all permitted and conditional uses within each district. So the ordinance as it's written now has a sort of nesting feature. For example, The R2 zone allows a set of uses as well as any use from R1. So we think it's a better policy to list everything in each district, again, so you don't have to flip back and forth to understand what's happening. Another thing we can do is create a master table of all uses. So this is, so the ordinance specifies all the uses by list. This puts it all in a table as a kind of quick reference document. It makes it easier to find what you need. We're also organizing uses here by residential, civic, commercial, industrial, and so on as a kind of reference document. Next, listing all the definitions in one place. The existing ordinance has definitions in a few different places. There's a definition section up front. Some of the districts, like the flood hazard district, have their own definitions contained within that section. It's best to have them all in one place as a kind of glossary, so that when people are looking for a definition, they know where to find it. Following that, provide definitions for all uses. There are land uses that are specified in the existing code that don't come with a definition. There are other terms that aren't defined that probably could be. And so by defining all uses and generally adding definition terms, it just helps folks to understand the code and to find answers when they have questions. So we've expanded that definition section by adding some terms. So that's for streamlining. The second goal was to protect existing single-family neighborhoods. So this looks at residential districts. There are several. So existing residential districts are R1, R1A, R1E, R2, and R3. First thing we suggested was to combine the R1 residential districts. Again, R1, R1A, R1E. They're all very, very similar. They only differ in their setbacks. That's the only difference there. And they are, so a single R1 district, we think, improves clarity. The suggestion we made is to merge the setbacks that are provided there. 10,000 square foot lot is common to all of those three, so maintain that. R1A and R1E have slightly smaller setbacks, 25 foot front and rear, whereas R1 is 25 front and 50 rear, as well as using R1's side yards, which are the larger between R1, R1A, and R1E at 10 feet. So the idea there is to combine those districts and provide dimensions that prevent as much nonconformity as possible. So a diagram that shows the potential change there. Solar has been a topic of conversation. I think when Ms. Zirkle was introducing this ordinance to the public meeting last week, she mentioned that it was essentially updated in the 1980s, or adopted in the 1980s, and hadn't seen a lot of changes. So one of the things we wanted to do with this revision is to tackle some issues that really weren't on people's minds back then, but might be now. One of those is how accessible solar panels are these days. So as it is, you need to, in the existing code, you need to come in for a use permit in order to get rooftop solar panels. Our suggestion is that roof-mounted solar panels that are primarily designed to serve the building they're attached to could be a by right use, and that still any ground-mounted solar or private utility, that is solar that serves something beyond the building it's attached to, would still be a conditional use and require permit. Third goal was to activate the Centertown district. So where we are now, the idea is that it be provided for as a vibrant downtown area where business can flourish. And there are some things that we suggest that might be done to help Centertown be vibrant. One is to allow multifamily residential by right. Right now, multifamily residential in the B1 is a conditional use. Allowed by right, it might encourage a bit more downtown living and allow more people to live downtown and therefore patronize businesses downtown and just generally make the neighborhood a bit more active. So a small change that while it doesn't guarantee downtown residential, it provides the opportunity for property owners to pursue that if they'd like to pursue that. That was the only one for Centertown. Goal 4, to stimulate residential and employment growth. First thing is modernization. I mentioned a minute ago modernizing. There are uses that are common now that simply weren't as common in years past or were used in a different way. These days, we see breweries, for example, as less of an industrial use and sometimes a use that's welcome within the downtown, for example, on a small scale. So breweries and wineries, custom manufacturing, which is a type of artisan manufacturing where people are making and selling, hydroponic agriculture. These are sort of modern use terms that weren't included in the older ordinance that might be useful to the town in the future. Next item here is one of the bigger ones, is to remove the planned residential development zone. So the planned residential development zone is a type of planned unit development, and planned unit development provides an alternative path to traditional zoning. It essentially says, if a project that you have in mind for your property doesn't fit under traditional zoning, you can bring it in as a planned development. Its benefits and challenges can be weighed by the town, and if approved, your proposal becomes controlling to that property in the future. So you have some existing planned development in the town. Governor's Hill is a planned development. There's also the sort of patio homes by the hospital. I've forgotten the name of it. Oakwood Villas, yes. These are planned developments. The issue with the PRD zone as it's currently written is that many parcels are zoned PRD that do not have planned development. No development plan has ever been submitted. So the rule within the existing PRD is that if you don't have a plan for your development, that you're allowed to do anything under R1 within PRD. It's a bit cleaner and makes a bit more sense to instead have those properties zoned R1, because that's essentially what they are zoned if they don't have a plan. Planned development still has a place in the town, and we've separately suggested a sort of new and revised planned development district. C was removing outdated and obsolete uses. There are some terms that are used by the existing code that are simply not common terms anymore. They're not in common usage. And we want the ordinance to speak plainly and normally. There are uses included like boarding houses, nonprofit organizations as a land use, electrical motor shops, tea rooms, and others that are just not common anymore. The same sort of uses or businesses might find their place under other terms, but these terms are perhaps obsolete. D, eliminating lot provisions based on water and sewer. So under the existing code, different lot sizes are prescribed in residential districts depending on whether you have water or sewer. So it might be 10,000 square feet if you have water and sewer. It might be 15,000, for example, if you have water but no sewer, 20,000 if you don't have water or sewer. First of all, most areas of the town are served. There are a few areas of the town that are unserved. In those areas, the better way to handle that is to have lot sizes determined by the health department and by individual engineering of septic systems rather than by the zoning code. Because the zoning code does not know what it takes, how much area is necessary to get a functioning septic system onto a lot. So that should be decided outside of zoning ideally. We don't want the zoning code to suggest that 20,000 square feet gets you a septic system. It's possible that it does not. Goal number 5 was to increase development flexibility. A few things we can do to bring that about. One is to broaden the uses in the B2 district. So B2 is the general commercial or sort of highway commercial type district, as opposed to B1, which is the Centertown downtown commercial district. We have seen instances of underused or disused properties in the B2, and there are potentially ways to make use of those, make them profitable to the town's tax base, to provide economic development, to provide employment. A couple of ways we might do that is by allowing light manufacturing or data processing as conditional uses. So those would still require an application, a presentation to you all, a weighing of the merits of the application, but it opens the door to a slightly wider slate of uses that property owners might consider. B is the elimination of the T&O, that's the traditional neighborhood overlay. The T&O applies to several parcels along 122, the general area between the D-Day Memorial and Main Street. It was designed as a second type of planned development district, an optional alternative to underlying zoning for master plan development. But there are issues with the T&O. It is not calibrated to the size of parcels in the area, which is a sort of major tripping point there. The minimum development size for a T&O project is 40 acres, but there are no parcels approaching 40 acres that it applies to. And that means for the T&O to ever be used for anything, a developer would have to buy a number of parcels, combine them in a sort of unlikely scenario. So we have a separate planned development district that could still be used in that area. So eliminating the T&O and using planned development as a rezoning rather than an overlay is the cleaner option in our opinion. So the T&O has never actually been used as written. So I mentioned planned development. We still think planned development is a great thing and recommend it to all communities, essentially. So we wanted to introduce a new PMD, Planned Mixed Development Zone, that would replace PRD and T&O. Again, an alternative development path that allows people to ask for a rezoning for planned development, to propose a planned development to staff whose merits are weighed by Planning Commission and ultimately the Town Council for potential approval. So that would be an option that's available town-wide. The developer would submit a plan. The PMD zone that we've drafted includes requirements for parcel size, for requirements for providing open space, limits on the mix of uses, limits on residential density, and others, to generally give some guidance to developers what the town is expecting. They're free to submit a development plan, but there are some expectations, and so those are expressed in that zone. Part D is homestay. So homestay is the term that we've used in this case, and it's used by some other communities, to encompass all the things that are sometimes called Airbnb or VRBO or Vacasa or all those other apps that people use to rent out houses or parts of houses on a short-term basis to people who are in town temporarily for tourism or business or other. So we're using this umbrella term homestay to avoid sort of endorsing any particular app. So the recommendation that we've included in the draft is that homestays be allowed by right in commercial zones and only by conditional use permit in residential zones. That is, an application would have to be made. Again, the merits of the application weighed by the Planning Commission, a recommendation made to the Town Council for approval. We've also drafted within the proposed revisions special provisions for homestays. So there are special provisions for various uses that provide additional guidance and regulation. And so we've included homestay special provisions that include a number of things. One is that any owner who wants to do this sort of thing registers with the town. They pay the same occupancy taxes that hotels pay. They provide parking for their guests, limits on the number of guests. We worked with the building inspector on building safety issues, so requirements for ingress and egress and the provision of fire suppression, including fire extinguishers. Following the last meeting of the Planning Commission, the suggestion was made that we also include language on the suitability of the sewer system. And so we have included that in the newer draft. It requires anybody who wants to do a homestay to provide a certification from a plumber that the lateral connection between the public sewer and the building has been inspected, or that the septic system is being maintained and regularly pumped in order to do that. And so that would need to be provided to the town. Also included in there are is provisions for revoking the permit of a homestay if conditions are not met, or if essentially if trouble is caused, if they don't help maintain the sort of quiet order of the neighborhood, and complaints are made and verified, that the homestay might be revoked. So I want to note here how this sort of thing is being done right now. So homestays don't exist in the current code, but this sort of thing has started to come up, and the town has been regulating or attempting to regulate homestays by lumping them into the same category as bed and breakfast. So bed and breakfast is allowed, again, pretty broadly by right in commercial districts. It's allowed by right in R3, and it's allowed by conditional use permit in R1 or R2. Now, bed and breakfasts are, they don't make great bedfellows, homestays and bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfast is bigger. Bed and breakfast is up to 5 rooms for rent. But your bed and breakfast definition also allows dining for up to 14 persons who are not guests within a bed and breakfast. So essentially running a small restaurant. So this is the need to introduce homestays as a separate thing. And so we've introduced it as a separate thing. Like bed and breakfast, conditional in R1 and R2, conditional in R3 rather than by right the way bed and breakfast is, and then permitted in commercial districts. Okay, next is the LP zone. The LP, or limited professional zone, is a zone that exists or was created to provide a buffer between the downtown business district and residential zones. So it is a zone that allows certain commercial uses, like offices, within existing structures. So it might be what was once a house, now an architect's office, near the downtown. So to provide a bit of a buffer and a bit of a transition between the two, because downtown business and residential right up against each other could create conflict. So right now LP only exists on paper. There are no actual parcels that are zoned LP. So a couple of changes we want to make here, or we would suggest to make here. First is that this LP zone that only exists on paper only applies to existing buildings. We think that it should apply to all buildings, including potentially new buildings, to allow that transition to sort of build out. And we also have some mapping suggestions that we'll get back to. So goal number 6, less focus on individual uses, more focus on scale and character. A couple of things here. First, introducing 2 land use definitions, one commercial retail and one commercial service uses. In some places in the existing code, the code kind of goes out of its way to list as many kinds of residential as it can. And so it says retail such as bookstores, jewelry stores, clothing stores, and so on and so on. We think it's easier to understand, cleaner to use, to put commercial retail, all retail, regardless of what the store is selling, into a single commercial retail category. Now, there are some exceptions to the generalized commercial retail category. There are some things that, when businesses sell them, it's just a bit different, like cars or lumber that have a bigger footprint. And so those are handled separately, but sort of generalizing commercial and service and not spending time in the ordinance trying to recite as many types of stores as we can think of. Part B here is simplifying sign regulations. The sign regulations as they exist is a bit difficult to understand. It talks about a bunch of different kinds of signs, pole signs and awning signs and window signs and so forth. One really good way to handle sign regulations is to provide a total budget of sign area based on your district and your building frontage. So if you're in B2 and your building has 100 feet of frontage on the public right-of-way, you get a certain square footage of signage, and you can use that as you see fit. The other thing that we're doing with sign regulations, the other suggestion here, and it's a strong suggestion, is to eliminate content-based sign regulations. This relates to a Supreme Court decision that was handed down in 2015 or 2016, where the Supreme Court of the United States determined that it was unconstitutional to regulate signs based on the message of the sign. And so this is something that the town needs to be in compliance with. It's a First Amendment issue, and not something that we want to see messing with. So, for example, a lot of zoning codes do regulate signs based on their message, and it says a church sign can be this big, and a gas station sign can be this big, and a real estate sign can be this big. The Supreme Court decision points to the idea that signs should be treated generally in the zoning districts. You know, regulate the size of the sign, but don't base that regulation on what the sign says. We've also included illustrations within the sign regulations. We've included illustrations in a few places with proposed revisions to help define terms and to help explain concepts. Part C, relocating certain special provisions. This is just an exercise in moving things around so they're easier to find. All special provisions will now be in Article 8. Previously, there were various special conditions found in Article 7 and Article 9, sometimes within individual districts. We just want the code to be as usable as possible, so you don't have to go hunting for stuff. Part D was introducing new special provisions. So I talked a bit about the special provisions for homestays. We've also suggested some special provisions for accessory dwelling units, for drive-throughs, for outdoor display of retail goods, essentially to organize things. Drive-throughs, for example, we want people to provide enough stacking space that the drive-through doesn't back up into the public right-of-way and cause traffic issues. Part E, providing new dimensional regulations. As it exists, there are several districts where the existing code does not provide setbacks, building heights, lot widths, and so on, minimum lot areas. So the LP, the B1, the B2, the M1, and so on. No dimensions were previously given. We have suggested some reasonable dimensions that sort of comply with other similar districts that you already have, focusing on flexibility, but providing some guidance. Also, like land uses, providing a master table of those dimensional requirements so they can be found all in one place. And that's the text. We also looked at the zoning map and some changes there. The two zoning maps are located over here if anybody wants to have a closer look. The more yellow one is the proposed revision. The more green one is the existing. So a couple of things. We talked about removing the PRD and reverting those unplanned parcels that are otherwise governed by R1 into R1 and marking them as such on the map. We had suggested doing away with the traditional neighborhood overlay district, so we're doing that with the map. We suggested mapping several selected parcels to the LP district. That's that district that's meant to be a transition between central business district and residential district. So we've suggested several parcels might go ahead and be mapped based on their position and existing uses. A few things that were sort of done as cleanup exercises. There is an existing M1 designation in the area of Maxwell Circle, which is surrounded by residential use. We've suggested that be changed to light industrial rather than manufacturing. That still allows relatively broad use. It allows what we've understood to be the existing use, which is some furniture manufacturing on that site, but it would prevent heavy manufacturing use in the otherwise residential area. So concrete mixing and other things that are more intensive and potentially in conflict with residential. There is an area of Rough Drive and Earnhardt Drive, which are currently designated R1 and B2, but that contain homes. People live there in individual single-family dwellings, and so the suggestion is to revise those to R1 to reflect the existing use and to protect those homeowners from potential conflicting manufacturing use. The other thing that was tackled with the remapping exercise was the reversion parcels that were incorporated into the town in July as part of the planned reversion agreement. So parcels were brought into the town that have various uses and had various zoning categories when they were part of the county. According to the reversion agreement, every parcel that's reverted comes in as R1. That's in the legal documents that govern that reversion. So we have made some suggestions to remap some of those parcels from their automatic R1 designation to things that better reflect their existing use, so that some of the small businesses that are on these sites can continue to operate their business and not run into zoning issues. So that includes some light industrial designation, some designation to limited professional, and on the other side of town, a PMD designation. This is the part of the Harmony development. The idea there is to minimize nonconformity and allow people to continue to use their property the way they were before reverting. So that is the rundown, and I understand that this is a lengthy document and there's quite a bit of technical stuff in there. But again, we've worked with the town, with staff, with you all as a planning commission over the course of several years to propose some revisions that we think improve the zoning code, make it easier to use, and organize themselves along the lines of those 6 controlling themes. So that is where I will stop, because I know this is a public hearing, and we need to let the public speak.
Thank you, Todd. All right, so we're going to open the public hearing now. Again, we'll limit your comments to about 4 to 5 minutes tops, and I'm just going to go straight down the list. First on the list is Nina Johnson. And if you will, state your name and address in the microphone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nina Johnson. I live in Lynchburg. The property that I purchased is on Macon Street in Bedford, right off of Bowen Street. I purchased the property off of an auction site where I won the auction site about a year ago, with the perception of, I thought from what they listed was saying that it was residential. It wasn't until I started planning to build or put something on there that I discovered from the place that I was looking at manufactured homes that I wasn't unable to put it on there, so I ended up calling the planning and zoning, where they told me that it was not residential and that it was commercial, which from when I got the property on the auction site, they didn't list anything of it being commercial property. They just pretty much said that it was residential. When I got the deed, the more I started reading into it and speaking with the planning and zoning is where I saw that it was in fact commercial. There's already residents in the area that is occupying some of the land, so I just, with hopes of it being rezoned from commercial to residential, that I can be able to utilize that land.
Okay.
Is it zoned M1 now, or do you know? It's zone B2. It's actually one of the areas that Mr. Gordon just showed you. It's kind of captured partially on this one item I do need to talk to you about further. It's the left side of Macon Street off of Baldwin, where it was Zone B2, all the way to Macon Street and the railroad tracks, and we recommended a change to make that R1, to make those lots conforming where there are existing houses, and to help Ms. Johnson with her situation that we were aware of, where those are clearly not commercial, and they're not commercially sized, they don't front on 460. So we had a conversation at one of your meetings about zoning that specific area, and
So
that
we did
recommendation is
change it to
R1.
R1?
Yes, that's your recommendation. That's what we recommend.
She's fine now.
So you're okay? You
If
would
the
be
recommendation
okay,
goes forward as is, yeah.
It's approved.
Yeah. So you're saying-
Proves you're okay.
She's speaking in favor of the recommendation.
Just clarification.
Thank you. Okay, next is Gloria Pulkowski. Name and address, please.
Gloria Bukowski, 1103 Emerald Crest Drive. Thank you all for being here this evening, and I know you're taking time from your lives, and I appreciate all that you do for this community. I can tell that you all love the community, and I have come to love it too. I've been here for 3 years, and I do have some concerns about zoning. One thing is that I was told it was going to just clarify and update, and here it's a complete overhaul. 190 pages. I mean, I've read shorter novels than this, and it's more like a textbook, and then trying to compare this and that. And to be honest with you, I haven't read the whole thing, and I just was able to skim over some of the parts that affect me. I'd like to review the whole thing, but it just, we didn't have time. I feel like it's being shoved down our throats. And another concern that I have is that we are doing the ordinance before we are doing a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan should come first. It's like putting the cart before the horse, or building a house and then later drawing up the plans for the house. It just doesn't make sense, and I don't know why it was done this way. Are you going to have to then, once you do the comprehensive plan, are you then going to have to get a contractor again and revise some of this to agree with the comprehensive plan? Another thing is, one of this purposes is to protect the existing single-family neighborhoods. I feel some of the things are doing complete opposite. One is reducing the R1 backyard setbacks to 25 feet. I have a 10-foot backyard. Some of the townhomes where I live in Governor's Hill, less than a 10-foot backyard. You're going to have somebody put 25 feet behind me. That means their back door and my back door are going to be 35 feet apart. I mean, I have my neighbors now on the side yards. I can look into their house and they can look into mine, and my husband and I keep on changing the blinds because I don't want them looking in our bedroom upstairs and their patio. He keeps on moving the blind the other way because when they're walking down, he doesn't like them looking up into the bedroom. So I'm really concerned. I think the R1 should still be 50 feet, if not more. And that adds to overcrowding of the land, I think. And it's not meeting the needs of the people living there, and it makes it less desirable having small backyards. I had concerns when they were going to build behind us about the trees falling so close to our house. And it even gives me more of a concern. There's no backyard, hardly any backyard for children to play in. We have that problem now in Governor's Hill. And if you don't have you're getting rid of the PRD, there will be no playgrounds, no area for the children, and they play in the streets where I live because there's no yards to play. And the front yards are being shortened too. And one time when I was on Crest Ridge Drive, some girl darted out in front, in between two cars, and I didn't see her, and I almost hit her. I mean, the girl, poor girl was scared to death, and so was I. I just think you need to have the 50 yards, and I'll give you a couple examples. One is about